So there's two sort of intersecting trends, the frustration of our political leaders to effectively address the problems of our time and the capacity of people using technology to come together more rapidly than ever before. And I think what's exciting about that for the NGO sector is it brings together people who wouldn't have otherwise taken action on issues and who are then accessible by nonprofits to mobilize for additional fundraising. And I talk a little bit about sort of how that base of support is built in a way that hasn't previously been possible. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about why I'm here and why I have any legitimacy whatsoever in talking about this topic. So Change.org, a little bit of an overview. So we empower anyone to start and join campaigns around the issues they care about. An open platform, sort of like a YouTube for online campaigns. We have been growing rapidly since 2010. It was a really difficult time. I don't have the graph. We started in 2007. It's really depressing. So this is better. Yeah, we're growing, sort of trying to go up and to the right to 100 million members as fast as we can. So things have been going well, and I'll talk a little bit about that. There's 2.5 million members in Spain alone. Sort of an amazing team actually sitting right here in the front. Polo, Albert, and Danny doing amazing work here in Spain with a bigger team and growing throughout the world. And what we do is not just empower people to start and join campaigns, which I'll talk about in a second, but also then enable organizations based on those new members to build their base of supporters, build their base of donors. We're doing this primarily in the US thus far. I've worked with more than 250 NGOs, most of the large organizations in the US, a lot of organizations increasingly in Europe, and doing this in the order of millions of new supporters that we're helping organizations acquire every single month. So I want to talk about a little bit of the context of how we see the problem that NGOs face in general just for fundraising. You guys know this much better than me in many ways. The sort of fundamental problem is, right, how do you identify amongst a population of people those who are most likely to be interested in your issue? Right? So this is my really bad attempt at trying to make this look like Spain and like people all over Spain. And what's exciting is, so in the abstract, right, the question is, where are these people? And so in any sort of issue, you have some sort of identified population of people that might be able to interested in taking action on what you work on. Right? Maybe 5%, 1%, 10% of the population. And the challenge is, what are the means by which you can acquire those people? How do you actually go and prospect? Right? The primary way, in Spain, telemarketing and face-to-face, which are effective in many ways. But one of the challenges, besides being expensive in some contexts, is volume. Right? Just the limited capacity to effectively identify all the people who might be interested. It's just the happenstance of the people that you run into in the street, the people whose phone numbers you're able to find, and it's just a huge under-optimization of the potential market size, the potential number of people. I think for most organizations, there are like 10 times more people that might be interested in what you work on than are currently accessible via most means of communication. And so this is sort of the kind of the small crap shot, trying to get some small selection of prospective supporters, and the goal is, how do you increase the rate at that, and ideally not just expose yourself to many more people that might be interested, but have them come back to you, but have people actually mobilize around proactively through peer-to-peer sharing the issues that you're working on. And so the way we've found to do this, and the reason we've got 20 million members growing at more than 2 million new members a month, is allowing for very lightweight actions that people can take largely online, as a means of then becoming a part of the base of support that can contribute financial support. And I'll talk a little bit about a couple examples of how this has happened around the world, and how these sort of simple things, really petitions, kind of the oldest tool in advocacy with social media, have taken off and have sort of helped organizations build massive bases of support and therefore fundraising support. There's one example I'll talk about to start off with. There's this huge debate in the United States around gun rights, right? Around sort of gun control and whether people should have equal access to not just regular guns, but semi-automatic weapons and so on and so forth. And there's a group called Second Chance, started by Michael Bloomberg, as a mayor of New York City, has a bit of money, and they started an organization about a year ago. And their question was, how do we identify people across the US that might be interested in gun control issues? It's a hugely expensive proposition. Direct mail is still big in the US. It takes 3 years to get your investment back, but it's just really, irrespective of funds, difficult to find those people. And so at the same time as Second Chance was trying to identify how they start to build a base of support, there's this real tragic case that happens in the United States. And a number of you might have heard about it. And that story is about 4 or 5 months ago, and there's a 17-year-old African-American boy who's in Florida walking back to his parents' place. And there's a vigilante, doesn't have any official status, who follows him with a gun. He turns around, shoots him, and he kills Trayvon Martin. And what's interesting is there's almost no media reaction to this at all. And the reason he was able to have a gun is because this curious law in Florida that allows you to possess guns and what's called stand your ground. If somebody turns around, looks like they might confront you, you can shoot them, and it's legal. And so for 2 weeks, nothing happened at all. And then Trayvon Martin's parents decided to take action. They started a petition on Change.org, and it massively exploded, went viral across the country, got more than 2.2 million people to join, a huge media story. And in this sort of wake of this tragedy, and sort of the end result of this was the killer of Trayvon Martin, who previously had been totally exonerated, not even investigated, was ended up arrested. Now he's being prosecuted in Florida because he embarrassed the police department. And what you had here is you had then sort of people self-identifying their interest in issues around gun control in a way that the organization itself, Second Chance, could never have predicted. And so in the wake of this tragedy, you had Second Chance come to us and work with us to identify among the people who took action on the Trayvon Martin case who would be most interested in being a part of a movement around gun control across the country. And so the way this works is we have a petition around Trayvon Martin, and then afterwards suggest, based on an algorithm of personal recommendation, what other issues you might want to join. And over the course of, I think, about 3 days, 324,000 people joined Second Chance. And they went from basically 0 members to 324,000 who now are growing more and more engaged in their issues and then can become donors over time. I'll talk about that in a second. And so the question is, we get this a lot where there's an increasing number of petitions. And this just seems curious to many people because there's seemingly nothing new. These are things that historically have been used time and time again. And really there's a huge amount of skepticism about the power of petitions. And I think it's understandably the case. And the reason is, historically, they haven't had a lot of impact. They've mostly been started around big, broad social issues, trying to do things like stop global warming or end global poverty, the kind of things that are difficult to access and actually win. And what's exciting now is that anyone can start a campaign. They have characteristics now that are much more impactful, much more viral. And so the reason for this is, I think this explosion is a fewfold. One is, it's now the case that anybody, anywhere, can start a petition on any issue they care about. And they're doing so in massive, massive numbers. There's more than 15,000 campaigns launched every month right now on Change.org, which is more than the total number of campaigns from the entire NGO sector in the US by a large shot. It's a huge number, huge explosion of campaigns. And because any individual can start a campaign, they're much more diverse, much more widely appealing in many ways than the traditional campaigns that have been started. And there are also 3 more characteristics that I think are relevant. One is that because of social media, they are much more rapidly growing. At the peer-to-peer distribution that allows for free and fluid communication makes them rapidly expand. The second is that they're oftentimes responsive to the real-time news cycle. It tends to be the case historically that organizations starting campaigns haven't been able to respond rapidly to what's happening in the news to capture in real time the people who might be mobilized around that issue, might be activated by that issue. The third thing is they're much more personal. Because individuals oftentimes are starting them, or they're much more local and focused in scope, they're much more personally resonant. And I'll talk about a few of those stories that are really clear. And the last is they're winnable. It used to be the case that petitions largely had sort of an unclear mechanism for advancing the change they sought. And right now, we're seeing campaigns that are much more distributed and winning all the time. There's more than a dozen a day that are happening right now. So the first example, I'll give a few examples of sort of how petitions are both advancing real change, mobilizing more people than ever before, and then helping to build nonprofit movements, helping to build the capacity for organizations to build a base of support they can go back to on a regular basis for sort of both sort of advocacy, but also primarily fundraising support. So this is a case that happened about a year and a half ago. It was the first campaign that went viral on Change.org, and it was an incredible demonstration of the potential of people power and why we really pivoted to this model and how things have grown so quickly. This woman is Nudume Funda, and the story is one of her good friends was walking down the street in Cape Town, South Africa. And it's a really tragic case. She's grabbed and thrown into a shack and raped and almost killed. And the reason is she's a lesbian woman and the man was trying to turn her straight. Right? It's a terrible thing that happens more than 10 times a week in Cape Town alone. It's called corrective rape. There's even a name for it. So Nadume had this happen both to her friend and her partner previously, and she decides to finally take action, to do something about it. And she goes to an internet cafe, starts a petition, asking the government, that after 10 years of ignoring the issue, to finally take it seriously and investigate. And with no real hope of having actual impact. But in the next 7 days, incredible stories. She gets 175,000 people from 150 countries. This hugely viral campaign. It embarrasses the government of South Africa. It gets huge media exposure, ends up getting the chief of staff and then the minister of justice of the country to be investigated and interrogated in public television. Embarrasses him. They then mobilize a protest in front of Parliament. And after a couple months of organizing, they get the government to pass a national task force to investigate and to stop the issue of corrective rape in that country. An incredible demonstration, and this is their campaign, incredible demonstration of the capacity of even the least powerful people to come together to make historic in that country change. What's also exciting is the organization that started this. Nadume actually started an organization out of it called Lilike Sezwe, started just before. And so not only was it the case they won this awesome historic change in the country, they also built a base of over 170,000 supporters they can follow up with to ask for additional support donations. And so it's both the case that they were able to mobilize people around an issue specifically to engage them, to increase awareness, but also to build this base of fundraising support going forward. This is what we see time and time again. We see this oftentimes also people that are mobilizing others around issues they care about and organizations connecting to them to build their base of support. And this is one example. This is in the US last year. This is a 22-year-old girl, Molly Catchpool. The story is that the largest bank in America, called Bank of America, launches in the context of the financial crisis after being bailed out by the American government and having record profits, starts laying off people and charging extra fees to use your own debit card, which is a great way to piss off your customers. But traditionally, customers wouldn't have a substantial outlet for action. And then a 22-year-old part-time nanny, Molly, who's disenchanted because of this policy, starts a petition, and she gets more than 300,000 people to join, embarrasses Bank of America, massive amount of media exposure, and in the context of this, after a month of campaigning, gets Bank of America to announce they're dropping all these fees. Then every other major US bank who are considering the same fees did the same. An awesome, awesome demonstration, again, of people power. But what's cool, as well as what we're able to do, is take these 300,000 people, take the people that were acquired and mobilized through this campaign and connect them to organizations that are working on those types of issues. And that's what's exciting about this is it's taking the map of the country where people used to be disconnected and not easily mobilizable and offering them up in a collective community that then other organizations can engage with to advance deeper change. A couple more quick examples. It's an example here in Spain. There's a huge number of campaigns that have taken off in Spain over the past year. And this is one that was actually right before Christmas. And there is a consumer of chocolate, a woman who loved sweet jar, but wanted them to accept fair trade, accept fair trade chocolate. So it starts a petition, and it appears that there are many other people that feel the same. People you wouldn't have expected before, you didn't know cared about fair trade, but came together, more than 60,000 people, to come together in unison around this issue. Now, in this case, we weren't working with lots of nonprofits, so there wasn't an organization that were working on fair trade that could then take these people, right, mobilize them for further action, to make donations, to engage over time with that organization. But the potential, right, is massive at scale that wasn't previously possible, and the speed that's almost immediate. This happens over the course of a few days, over a week. And the last example I'll give, just an awesome demonstration. This happens all around the world in unexpected ways. This is an incredible campaign about women in Saudi Arabia fighting for the right to drive. And this is Mana al-Sharif, very famous women's rights activist in Saudi Arabia, and she takes a video of herself driving last year, which is illegal. Not taking a video of herself, but actually driving is illegal in Saudi Arabia for women. And she puts it on YouTube, and she gets arrested. There's a huge international outcry. But of course, one of the challenges of the Saudi government is the Saudi government won't respond to its own people. So a number of people who are friends with Manal decide to do something about this, and they want to fight the policy against women driving. And so they decide, instead of trying to petition their own government, they look outside Saudi Arabia for the other kind of people who might influence their own government. And so they start with starting a petition to ask Secretary Hillary Clinton, the first U.S. official in history to condemn the Saudi policy against women driving, They start this petition from within their houses. They can't even connect to each other. They're using Skype and email and Facebook. And they get no response from Secretary Clinton right away. Totally ignores the campaign. And about a week into the campaign, about 10,000 people had joined. And then she says on public television in response to a question that she's going to privately look into the issue. And then there's 10 more days or one more week, and there's a huge amount of exposure, a lot of social media embarrassment, more people join, more press inquiries, and finally, Secretary Clinton, after 2 weeks of totally ignoring the issue, becomes the highest-ranking official in U.S. history to condemn a Saudi policy, in this case, against the right to drive. And actually, they started a petition asking Catherine Ashton of the EU to do the same thing, and she did the same right after, another building more and more momentum. And what's cool is you're actually identifying now people around the world that care about this issue, and there are lots of organizations, human rights organizations that have started working with us to try to acquire the kind of people who care about these issues after they've been mapped through petitions on the site. So what we really have now, I think the result of this is that we've got every single month, right, tens of thousands of petitions started. And what you start to do is you start to map the landscape of people in a country or in a community and their interests. And we call this the interest graph, right? There's sort of this fancy thing about 5 years ago when Facebook launched Facebook platform, which is sort of the social graph, right? What are your social connections to other people? How do you map a population of people and identify how they're connected? And I think you're now seeing what's really exciting is actually the interest graph, which is how do you identify a population of people and see what issues they care about, map that, and effectively acquire, sort of engage with those people. And so this is happening right now. I think the number now in Spain is that there's more than 8% of the Spanish internet population that have signed campaigns and joined campaigns on change.org, and that's increasing rapidly every single month. And we're doing more and more. You can imagine all these different sort of people around the country that might be interested in issues, many of whom aren't engaged at all with existing organizations, or maybe only one, have a better and better chance of being mapped by platforms like change.org or petitions that organizations are starting and connecting to them. And we think this is going to be sort of a huge, huge shift in how organizations start to engage with potential supporters. Now, the question a lot of people ask us is, what does this mean for us, and why is it so important, right, that we acquire email addresses? There's this huge amount of excitement around sort of Twitter and Facebook, at least for engaging people around issues. Email is very old school. It's almost 20 years old. It must be dying. And so if you were to look at, and we look at this on a regular basis, if you were to compare 100,000 email addresses, 100,000 fans on Facebook, 100,000 followers on Twitter. This is going to depend on the type of organization, but what we see is that if you did that, you send a single message to those people via those three channels, email and Facebook and Twitter. What you'd expect to get the first time is about 5,000 people taking action right away via email, about 500 via Facebook, and about 100 via Twitter. Right? Shocks lots of people. We get on a regular basis people, celebrities that are tweeting out petitions to like 6 million followers, which is awesome and great for media, but primarily not for acquisition. So there are absolute uses for Facebook and Twitter. We get massive distribution through them. People share on those platforms. But if you want to communicate with a population of people that might be interested and get real results on hard quantitative data, right, email is by far, by many, many orders of magnitude, over Twitter especially, the most effective means by which to do so. It's still the case. And it's not incidental, right, that this is the primary focus, at least right now in the United States, for online engagement. Right? Every major U.S. nonprofit that's doing substantial fundraising is also doing a lot of acquisition online in almost every case. And we're working with many of the largest of these. And they're not doing so sort of small. They're not treating it as a kind of a sideshow where they do direct mail, they'll do sort of in-person, and they sort of do email. They're actually building out substantial programs for this. And they're acquiring, the fastest growing channel of acquiring new donors in the US around this is via email. And if you look at a couple of examples of what we've been able to do and what other organizations have been able to do with this sort of acquisition, the best example initially was the Obama campaign. So I've talked about it a lot, but in 2008, the Obama campaign with petitions and pledges were able to acquire more than 10,000 supporters. Right? Didn't ask them for donations in the beginning, purely got them as supporters. And then sent message to those people and over time raised more than $100 million directly through email from that list of 10 million supporters. Right? Now, this is unique. It's the Obama campaign. It was a special moment in American political history. But organizations now are doing similar things at smaller numbers. But if you look at the monetization, the amount of money that are raised per person on an email list, if it's run effectively, it's about 25% of that. It can be plus or minus some, but you're getting often several sort of euro per person per year. Maybe less. It depends again on the email sort of engagement program, but it's really substantial. And for us at Change.org, we've already helped acquire 10 million supporters for organizations around the world and growing at every month. And so you have this incredible capacity now both to map interests of people across a population and then to acquire those people into a program to engage over time. But it's not easy, right? It can't just be sort of a second afterthought. It's not something you sort of do as a sideshow, because if you don't have an effective program to engage people on a weekly basis around the issues they care about, you're not going to be leveraging it as effective a way as it can. What's exciting about email, it's so effective that we've seen, is it's a direct means of communication. Right? It's directly soliciting a specific ask with huge amounts of testing. You can easily test different variable messages and has zero cost effectively once you've acquired the donor. There's investment in time in setting up these email campaigns, but effectively, unlike telemarketing or face-to-face, every single time you can go back to people on a regular basis for additional donations or asks. So talk about a little bit about sort of how we see the future unfolding for sort of using the web for social change and how that integrates and incorporates into traditional fundraising programs. There's a lot of people that are sort of coming out there, sort of big internet people that want to tell you the web's going to disrupt everything, it's totally going to change, there's no way traditional means of fundraising are going to last, and this is not what we think at all. Right? It's clearly the case that things like telemarketing, face-to-face, are still going to be core parts of ongoing fundraising. But it is also the case, the fastest growing and the most, I think, interesting, and the one that supports those programs as well is what's happening online. It's the thing that's the most frictionless and has the capacity for greatest volume for the reasons I was mentioning before. So what does this mean for nonprofits like yourselves? What does this mean for organizations? And how do we leverage the same sorts of things that we saw that individuals are doing for your work? There's really two ways that we see this. And they're sort of related to this idea of how do you build online movements. The first is thinking about whatever issue you work on, even if you're not an advocacy organization, right? What are the means by which people can actually add their name in support of campaigns that you work on? That can start to build this base of support based on what you work on. We see this on a regular basis. We work with U.S. Fund for UNICEF and UN Foundation in the U.S., Amnesty International in the U.S., Greenpeace, lots of other organizations, and helping them sort of set up new campaigns to acquire people off whatever issue they're working on. Right? And this can be totally organic. You saw a lot of the examples of campaigns going viral and getting massive hundreds of thousands of supporters and generating the kind of base that can then be sort of engaged for fundraising. And that's the primary thing that we're seeing right now in the US. And the secondary thing that's increasing more and more are people using this using existing bases of support. Right? People that have joined viral campaigns and sponsoring campaigns, doing sort of paid advertising to promote their campaigns directly to people who joined others to build their base of support. And do that not 1,000 at a time or 10,000, potentially hundreds of thousands of times just overnight in a short period of time, building a large movement online that can be engaged. And this is something that we think is going to be increasingly exciting. And the reason is the internet's not going away. Right? If anything, things are getting more exciting and accelerating. We're seeing this more and more where sort of online campaigning and the ability to add people's voice to issues they care about is becoming a fundamental part of civil society. It's huge now in the US. There's literally about 500 campaigns a month started on the site in Change.org in the US a little over a year ago. Now there's more than 10,000 in the US alone every month. And this is just demonstrating people's increased appetite for taking action on these issues, and it's going to increase more and more. And it'll soon be the case that for almost any NGO, right, more than 95% of people that might be supporters, might be donors, will either be online or have a smartphone. Right? And that is people walking around with a computer in their pocket that will become an intrinsic part of their everyday experience, right, of engaging in issues, of making purchases, of doing whatever they might do offline traditionally, but assisted with a mobile device. And this is going to be hugely disruptive, but also, I think, hugely exciting. Hugely exciting for this sector because it's able to engage people in ways they weren't before at greater numbers and speed than ever before and provide a vehicle for the kind of engagement we haven't seen. And so I want to stop there for now and actually open up to questions and address a few of the issues that I think people want to talk about. And so we're going to have a microphone that is somewhere in the middle, I believe. And if people raise their hand, I'll call on them. If it's in Spanish, I think I'm going to get somehow a translation. Maybe Albert can just give me one in real time. And then I'll sort of address a lot of the stuff that you guys might have questions about. So first hand. Who's going to be the brave soul that wants to ask the first question? We have a microphone right here. It can be about anything. We got back here in the, right back here. Oh, I guess we have one up here as well.
Hola, hello. I'm a bit embarrassed to ask this question, but I'm thinking it in the meantime you've been speaking. How do you get money? How do you fundraise yourself?
How do we make money?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we work with NGOs. I mean, the platform that we have is completely free. Right? So anyone, anywhere can start a campaign for free on the site. And we generate revenue through sort of paid sort of sponsor petitions. So in the same way that you have sponsored videos on YouTube or sponsored tweets on Twitter, we have sponsor petitions where if you take action on an issue around, let's say, corrective rape, it might be the case that an organization, a human rights organization, will pay to have their own campaign recommended. And so based on the number of people who join that campaign, NGOs will pay us to promote it. And so what will specifically happen is when you join a campaign like around corrective rape, you'll have the option of signing a petition from a sponsor and then opting in and agreeing to find out more information via email from the NGO. And this is how in the US, there's more than 250 clients that are building their base of support, both with free petitions, but also oftentimes with sponsor petitions.
Thank you.
We had a question in the back as well.
I'll ask in English because I'm a native
Awesome.
speaker.
I'm going to answer in English.
My question was when people sign up for a petition, you have the data of who they are. Does the NGO have to buy that from you? How does that work?
So the way it works is, there's two situations. One is the free tool that we have, and the second is the sort of sponsored petitions. On the free tool, it's an open platform where NGOs automatically, as long as people opt in and agree to find out more information, they get the email and the contact information from signers. And so we actually have an interest in wanting to provide that platform for any NGO. So in the same way, if you had a petition tool on your own website, and you're able to have people sign and just sign up for your database, sign up for your membership, you can do that through Change.org as well. You can download the information. Again, it's sort of, all kind of conforms to sort of EU privacy regulations. But yeah, you're able to do so for free. And then, if it's a paid campaign as well, similar situation, although it's, in that case it's paid. But it's, again, people sign your petition, and if it's promoted via kind of an advertising sponsor petition, then that's a paid capacity. We've got a question here. Oh, over here.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, what are the main challenges you're finding in Spain?
The main challenges in Spain. So one of the main challenges is that for mobilization, it's oftentimes easier to engage with companies than with politicians. This is one of the ironies, I think, of sort of civic engagement right now, is that it's really sort of, the big open opportunity in many ways is focusing on these really small sort of campaigns. The ones that we see that are winning on a regular basis are very focused on oftentimes issues that aren't in the public forum all the time, that aren't sort of debated on a regular basis in politics. And I think that what we're doing now is we're seeing more and more numbers of people engage in building better and better tools to increase efficacy, not just for campaigns outside the political arena, but increasingly in politics as well. I mean, I guess the one other thing I'd just say is, we've sort of had this issue, kind of email-based fundraising in the U.S. started about, it's been around for a long time, but it started really in earnest. People got being really excited about it, in sort of the mid to late 2000s. And then sort of the Obama campaign blew this open, became massively popular. Every single NGO started hiring a new media director. Oftentimes those new media directors became heads of online fundraising as well. There's huge numbers of dollars invested in it. It's a sort of proven ROI. Everyone recognizes as a positive sort of value. Most people are making their money back in about a year, sometimes earlier, sometimes a little bit later, depending on the email program. And so, we don't have to sell people on this idea. Right? People come to us on a regular basis and are, they're doing they're trying to acquire 100,000, sometimes 1 million people. And I think in Spain right now, because there's less of that legacy, there's less of that demonstrated history, it's not as obvious to organizations that this will work. And there's not an infrastructure already that supports, that allows you to take 100,000 emails and then engage people over time. I think we're seeing a slower uptake to some extent, but we're also seeing, I think, faster and more interest than we expected. I think we had a question back here. I might be guessing wrong. Is there a question over here? Oh.
Sí, hola. No me queda claro Sí, no me queda claro el funcionamiento. Las ONG, ¿podemos acceder a datos afines a las causas? ¿Así es como funciona esto?
Yes. It's like yes in the middle of that statement. So the way it works is, so we're building this massive base of supporters, right? More than 20 million, more than 2.5 million in Spain. And so there's the ability for anyone to start a petition that's for free, and that people can go and because we have a massive base of supporters already, right, it may inquire more people than you would on your own website. But really the way most NGOs, at least in the US right now, are using the platform is they're saying, look, there's already millions of people on Change.org that care about what we're working on. We're going to start petitions that we would then work with Change.org on to promote to people on the site that care about those issues. And so it's almost like Amazon recommendations, where we take a huge number of people who care about issues, we know their issue interests, an organization that might that are interested, that works on a certain set of issues, and then connect them to the right people. So that's how things work right now.
The answer, because I had the same kind of doubt. But an NGO would have to post a petition in order to be connected to the group of persons who are interested, who share the same interests. So it wouldn't be possible, it has to be a specific petition. It wouldn't be possible to post like, say, I don't know, we work with abandoned dogs.
Yep.
Just in general.
Yeah, so a lot of organizations that want to build their membership don't do advocacy in a significant way, don't have petitions that are asking for specific change, but are broad, almost pledges. So UNICEF does this a lot with us, where it's support increasing medicines to kids in developing countries. Isn't a traditional petition. So while you can start those, it's oftentimes the case that we work with NGOs that do more charity, mostly charity work, not a lot of advocacy, and they'll take what we call soft asks. Just a very basic statement of, add your name in support of this that we work on, right? Add your name in support of, we want cleaner water for kids in Southeast Asia. And people will add their name, they've taken action on petitions that, are advocating for something specific, and then indicated their interest in that issue, and then a nonprofit will sponsor oftentimes a petition, and then people can add their name in support of that broad issue area. So it doesn't require to be an aggressive advocacy organization at all.
Hello. Do you enrich your data, crossing it with other data so you can get a better profile of the people?
So right now in the US, we in some ways enrich the data. The question is, do we enrich the data? Do we augment? We've got 20 million people who care about issues. Do we find out more about their interests? And we've done this to some extent in the US to find out basic demographics, predilection to donate, a lot of other certainly gender, and we've done that pretty effectively. And we're looking into what we might be able to do in the EU. It's a very sensitive thing around privacy, but we certainly are getting huge amounts of data just by people's actions. What emails they open, what actions they take, what number of shares they have, what they start campaigns. So there's all these different. We do what's called tacit tracking. So not just what people tell us about what they're interested in, but their click stream, where they click, and finding out what their issue interest might be. And then, of course, what we do have also is when you have a huge amount of data about people's issue interests, you can cross-reference them. So we know that if somebody comes in, they care about an issue on animals, and then they take action on another animals campaign, that's related to, say, oceans, we maybe know based on past behavior of other people, they really care about the environment as well. And so we're able to leverage the data that we just have accessible to be able to profile and take, a nonprofit sponsor petition and feature it to the right people. Question back.
Presumably, I would think that people would be fine with it, but have you found that sort of people that are going into change.org for sort of activist reasons, if then the crossover is done for fundraising, have you done any studies amongst the users that actually there is a sort of a natural and an okay link with that, or that they're bothered by that because they kind of go into a mind frame that this is an activist platform? And I'm just curious a little bit if...
What we tend to find is the reason people are taking action, right, is they want to see change. Right? They want to have impact. And so it's not that they see themselves as activists. Actually, what's exciting right now is you have more than 20 million people taking action. Most of these people are they're citizens that care about advancing change. And one of the vehicles through which they're able to do so increasingly effectively and at scale is adding their voice, right, through petitions. But we have, these sort of the people, the most likely people to donate that have already indicated interest in an issue. And we see on a regular basis, we've connected people, more than 10 million people to different organizations to then engage them for fundraising. And these are the kind of base of people that are most responsive to those fundraising appeals.
Can you give us an example of an NGO that has created a cause that change and fundraised a specific amount of money for it?
So we can't specifically say, I wish I gave specific numbers of kind of the amount of money raised. So let me think of, so a number of the organizations, I'm just saying what I can reveal. So one of the organizations that I'll just say it's the biggest, one of the biggest sort of international development organizations out of the US, they did a test. And the test was, they did a few 100,000 sort of members acquired on change.org, and they did sort of a new buy on direct mail, and they compared them. And the number of people, the ROI through the names they acquired, the several 100,000 names they acquired on change.org, paid for themselves in the first 12 months. So they're basically ROI positive and making positive cash flow. Then, of course, over the next 3 years, substantially increasing the amount of total net revenue generated from those people online, whereas it outperformed by many factors the traditional direct mail acquisition. And so this is sort of a fairly typical thing. If you look at the organizations we've been working with, most have been for the past 3 years, and every single year they're increasing the size of their buys because they're covering their costs the first year in most cases, not all, but most, and they're becoming more effective than the other acquisition channels they have. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't... Basically, the thing is, how do you get people who at first are just active at change? How do you make them like donors? That's the thing. How do you make them take that step? No?
Yep. So the steps are, I'll just kind of walk through the steps, and I should have done this before. So the primary thing is, let's say there's a campaign around an issue like corrective rape. Right? So you have 170,000 people that'll take action. Then there are organizations that work on issues related to this. Let's say either gay rights issues internationally or sort of women's rights issues. And they then start a petition, and we help them, sort of kind of maybe a pledge that sort of advance positive rights for women in Africa, let's say. And then we feature that to people who've taken action on this issue. So let's say you get then 25,000 people who sign that pledge for a human rights organization in Africa and decide to join and find out more information. That organization will then email those 25,000 people and say, well, this, you've taken action on this issue. We now have a fundraising campaign to support further programs to address this long-term issue. Right? And there's actually, it depends on the stream of communication. Sometimes there's a welcome series. So there's the whole strategy around how do you take then a database of people that care about your issue and engage them over time via email. It might be, sort of, first ask them to go take another action, another pledge, and maybe to have them take a survey, maybe sort of a welcome email. But really the idea is to engage them over time and ask them for money, maybe a one-time gift or a sustainer over time. It may be targeted on a specific program or on a general fund or around a certain time of the year. But that's the primary means of communication. And for organizations that already have some amount of email program, do email out. This just integrates directly into their email program. We had a question here in the middle.
To what extent is change.org an e-democracy tool, and what's your opinion on the potential of e-democracy in general?
Yeah. So there's a huge amount of excitement, I think, in a lot of forums about sort of radical kind of democratizing democracy. In some cases, direct democracy. That we're excited about is, right now, change.org is not so much a tool for decision making, but for accountability. And I think the first step to sort of democratizing democracy is having increased effective representation, not necessarily overtaking traditional representative government, but providing a mechanism by which citizens who previously had very difficult time organizing their interests in real time have that ability faster and more effectively than ever before. And so I think we're going to see kind of more and more of this happen, and it'll be interesting to see the extent to which this doesn't just increase democratic representation, but changes systems of government when anyone can come together and start campaigns. The thing I'd say there is it used to be the case that politicians would propose legislation and then people would support them. We now have people proposing campaigns, and at least in the US, politicians endorsing citizen campaigns. So it's a pretty interesting shift. I think we're going to see more and more interesting stuff over time, and it's going to add more and more people into platforms and going to be providing more and more potential support for NGOs. So thank you so much for your time. I think we are going to have drinks, not here, but very soon, someplace that'll be identified. I'd love to connect to anybody, answer any more questions there. I'll be there. Danny and our team and a few others, Paco and Albert, will be there as well. And I really appreciate your time. So thanks so much.